Welcome to Hindu at Heart. I am your host, Indu Viswanathan. Every episode, I will be speaking with an inspiring Hindu raised in the United States as they share their journeys, triumphs, insights, and the meaningful struggles that shape their lives. Join us as we explore the plurality of Hindu American experiences and perspectives. This episode, I am thrilled to be joined by my friend, Naren K Schreiner. Naren chose a religious vocation in Sanatana Dharma over 30 years ago. He spent 14 years as a brahmachari at the Self-Realization Fellowship, Yogoda Satsanga Society of India in Southern California, and then in 2012 was ordained as an Archaka Hindu priest of the Kali Mandir Ramakrishna Ashram. He spent time in Kolkata learning puja and sacred music. His desire to build community, to be a bridge between India and the West, and serve the Hindu diaspora led him to help establish the first Ram Mandir in Mexico in 2018. Last year, Naren was invited by the Hindu community in collaboration with the Indian Embassy in Mexico to establish the first Ram Mandir in Mexico. Naren travels to serve individuals and families, offering spiritual support, puja, sacred music, and Hindu samskaras such as weddings and house blessings. He serves as spiritual director and advisor to several organizations, and he gives presentations and talks on Sanatana Dharma and sacred music at universities, interfaith groups, and is passionate about supporting local Hindu youth groups. Welcome, Naren.
Thank you, Indu. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Wonderful. So I think the first question that everyone would probably ask is, how did someone like you, from your background, maybe you can dive into it a little bit, end up becoming a Hindu priest?
Yeah, I do get that question a lot, and it's easier to answer that question here with you and to be among Hindus. And I want to say also how much I love this concept that you come up with for this podcast, Hindu at Heart. Just the title makes me feel so comfortable. And I think it's so important to shine light on our hearts as Hindus, because there's so much of a pressure almost, or a drive to talk about our accomplishments and where we've found a place in society and all of that. And we can forget about our heart. And just that question, how did you become Hindu? Well, it has to do with the heart. It couldn't happen any other way. And I get that question mostly by other Hindus, especially when they've come from India, but even when they've grown up here, especially if I come to a home and I'm the priest. Like, what happened? How did this happen? There was one event that I was part of, and when I went back into the kitchen, there was an argument going on between two groups within the kitchen. They were arguing if my mother was Bengali or if my father was Bengali. That was the argument. So when I walked in the kitchen, they're like, okay. You tell us who's right. And I said, you're both wrong. I'm sorry. And so that's where the questions start to arise. I can truly say that I didn't become this way. I was born this way. And growing up in an American family, a very nice American family in California, with these feelings and these attractions, curiosities towards India was I very much internalized everything. But I think partly being in that generation in California, my parents were very open-minded. My dad was becoming interested in meditation, and that's a common experience that a lot have. And he got interested, was reading a lot of the books, maybe would have some interaction with that kind of culture. There were some exposure that I had. There was one Swami that was visiting town, and I think especially back then, this is like the 80s. There wasn't such a big boom yet of like spirituality and in Hindu spirituality or yoga even. So if someone like a Swami was going to come to town, usually everybody kind of found out about it who was interested. So as a kid, I would go along to a lot of those things, and it was good because for my little child heart and mind, I loved being around that environment. I loved being around. And of course, as most sadhus or holy people, they love children. So I got a lot of attention. And the swamis would call me over and start giving me prasad or ladus or something. And but then coming back home, it's an American home. And what do I do with that? So there was a period of time where my dad would be really interested in meditation. He started to have chant groups at his home. And I really loved that. I loved the kirtan. And this was in Seattle. So there were people from different groups like Sai Baba groups and whoever would come over because hardly anyone was doing these types of things. And to have kirtan meditation. But there was never a connection with this is Hindu. This is Hindu Dharma. This is what we do. And my dad was also very Christian. My mother too, in kind of a new age way of more universal and more spiritually inclined. And so throughout my childhood, I didn't know what to do with these feelings that I had and these interests. Anytime I saw anything from India, I always wanted to be a yogi. I was always drawn to that, but I didn't know how to express it. There were some experiences I had as a kid that I feel is like a blessing, a grace that from Guru, from Ma, because this idea of a reincarnated soul. I mean, I don't talk about it much because I think it's misused in a lot of circles. People talk about reincarnation. Oh, I was this, I was that. And I never liked that. But much later in my life, when I was in India and I met other holy people, that was the only explanation they could give. And these are like real sadhus, real purohits, real holy people who would say, there's only one explanation for this. You are a Sanatani, you are a child of Bharat. And for some reason, you were born there. And they almost felt sorry for me, like, we must help you. You know, we this must be so hard for you. And that was so different than others saying, oh, you're so lucky to be born in America. How great. You know, I want to be more like that. So growing up, it was very internalized. And I felt a lot of the things that a lot of my Hindu friends feel, like having a sleepover and you're going to someone's house and then they're like, come to church. And so me being, you know, looking like I'm just an American, of course, come to church. I couldn't say to anyone, but I felt so out of place, you know, going to Sunday school or going to church. And if they ever asked me, what church do you go to? My face turns red and, you know, I don't know what to say. Oh, we don't really go, or this is something, okay, you know, they just didn't, but I never just came out and said, oh, we're Hindu. That I didn't know, I didn't have the vocabulary, I didn't know what to say. And we weren't really like a together family, oh, we're all going to do these things together, you know, so I was trying to figure out what my place is in all of it. And at a pretty young age, as soon as I could start getting my hands on books and things, that's what I started to look for. When I was 14, that was a big moment. Amma, who was very well known now, but these were like her early visits. Amritanandamayi Ma, everyone calls her Amma or Ammachi. Early visits. Now she fills hotels with thousands of people, 10,000 people. But when she came, my dad had heard about it. She's coming. Let's all go. I just finished my freshman year, high school, so I wanted to go. And he just gave me some money. Said, "Here's some money for some food. I'm going to go sit with my friends and we're going to meditate." Okay, so I was just on my own, walking around, and it was all Indian families because this was in Mountain View, so in the Bay Area, California. There was already a growing Hindu community there, and they were hosting Amma. So it wasn't like a big hotel, and it wasn't a lot of Westerners. And I just was observing, and right away, one of the like aunties called me over and to give me some food, and I actually took out the money from my pocket just eating that food, being with that community, I felt comfortable. And that really it was a big impact on me, that this feels familiar to me, this feels comfortable to me. And then hearing the kirtan, seeing the puja, the smell of the camphor, the smell, all of these things were hitting me, and I couldn't say anything to anyone. And even my own father, he wasn't really drawn to that. He liked the fact that she was like a divine saint, and he liked the kirtan, but I really didn't have anyone to share it all with. But all of these experiences just kept building up something inside of me. There were others that I could talk about, but I won't, that can go on and on. But basically it started at a very young age. And as I grew, I just kept seeking that. And I realized that I have to do something about this. And I go to India. It wasn't so easy. So I started looking maybe for an ashram, something. And that led me to the Yoganandaji's ashram. I always felt like he was my guru, but I didn't know what to do with that either. Just like at my high school, there was one girl from India, and it's so strange. I hardly ever talked to her, and I still remember her name, Anshu. It's like, how is it that the one Indian girl, and this is the Bay Area. I'm sure now that high school has many, but I look back and I think if I had known a Hindu family, if I would have been there all the time. I would have started to make sense of a lot of these things that I feel. It wasn't until later that I really started to connect, with the Hindu communities. So I was really on my own and kept it to myself in a lot of ways. I would dread if anyone was going to come over to my house because I wanted to make my own little altar. So I had an altar in my closet. So I would just hope that my, school friends wouldn't see it and tease me or bully me, because you can almost guarantee that would happen if someone found out. And at the same time, I had such a strong calling that I had to follow that. I had to do something about that.
Thank you for sharing that. What I find so striking seems like a harsh word, so moving and so resonant in what you're describing. Oftentimes when you hear about, and we're going to go back to this word American, because I'm also American. Yeah. Oftentimes when you hear about people who are not born into Hinduism being drawn to it, it is oftentimes coming from, I'm going to go ahead and gender it, especially from men, it's often from a deeply philosophical or intellectual place. And yet what you clearly felt drawn to and already kind of pre-wired for, if I'm correct in understanding what you described, is puja, is something that's very embodied and expressive and earth-facing, as opposed to something a bit more, and not to say that you're not interested in the philosophy as well, but it's not purely the esoteric. It's very much, there's something about the aesthetic and the connection. Aesthetic might be too superficial. There's something about that deep, profound connection of puja, of community, of food, of people, that felt already alive. Seems like it was already alive in you. And then you found the place where it was sort of in harmony with what was around you.
Yes. Yeah. And where I am now, it's been a 30-year journey. So didn't really, starting out, what do we have? We have books. And I think for a lot of people, it becomes intellectual because they only have books. The gurus sometimes only are accessible through books, the rishis, the shastras. So I was also very hungry for the knowledge, and I would read a lot, and I loved the philosophy, but it's true. That wasn't enough for me. I would say that, I think being Hindu is that you take it all. And I think that when someone just wants part of it, which we see a lot in the West, it's like, well, I like the philosophy, but that's it. I'll read the Upanishad, but I don't want the puja or even the people. It's like, I don't want the community. I just want or just give me the sadhana, but I won't interact with the community. And I just I think I just knew from the beginning. It wasn't a thought process. It was just, I wanted it all. I was looking for all of it. And, of course, it came to me, and I think that's just grace. I mean, Ma, Bhagwan, they don't abandon us wherever we're born. And so to say that, well, the only way that Hindu Dharma will come to me is I have to be born in Bharat. Well, next life, who knows where any of us are going to be born? But I think if our heart is there, well, they will find us. So but it did. It had to be the wholeness of what it is. And yes, puja has grown. See, I couldn't learn puja at the beginning. It was so hard. I could learn meditation. I could get diksha. I could get sadhana, yoga sadhana, these things. I often say that like Vedanta or yoga exports well. It exports very well. It exports well to the West. You can give philosophy. You can give yoga sadhana. But puja doesn't. Puja is harder. So it was harder for me to find that that way to be initiated and to learn puja. But I really wanted it, and so eventually it came into my life.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I want to go back to this idea of exporting well, because I've been noodling on this for some time, and I've been speaking to other second gen. You know, my kids are third gen Hindu American, and so when we think about the future of American Hinduism, I don't think we can. I don't think it makes sense. I don't think it's a good idea for us to just take the parts that export well. And at the same time, we may find ourselves and our descendants resonating with something that feels a bit more American born on this land. You know, we are a tradition that begins with worshiping the land, and we live on, you know, land here. And so there is a part of puja and ritual, and you've established Mandirs, you know, in North America. So I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on this, but sort of like envisioning 3, 4, 5 generations from now, what might puja look like in the United States, Hindu puja?
Wow. Yeah. What a wonderful question. It's so important. And yes, as Americans, us as Americans, and I'm just to insert a little anecdote of when I learned these terms was when I met Varun Soni. I was telling you about that a little bit at USC, and he's the Dean of Religious Life at USC, the first Hindu to hold that position. And he and I had a wonderful conversation, and he said, I'm a Hindu American and you're an American Hindu. And I was a little confused. But he said, you are, on the outside, you are a majority. And on the outside, I'm a minority. And then he said, but on the inside, we're both religious minority. And when he said that, when he voiced that, and I could hear that after so many years, it really hit me. And it explained so much of why I felt the way I did. And yes, being American, however it, you know, whether it's Hindu American, American Hindu, we were establishing, like you are establishing, almost like a new family lineage and history on this land, in this society, in this country. And it is, no matter what people may say or what current political climates are, it is a very free society in the sense that eventually a community can build a Hindu temple. You know, some Hindu communities had a lot of obstacles, even with city councils and things like that. But eventually we see there's Hindu temples being built and constructed, and there's this sense of religious freedom is happening. So what can we do with it, and what will it look like? And when we have puja, which is such a there's parts of it that's very rigid, and it should be, and then there are aspects of puja that are not. They're flexible. They're meant to adapt to the land. So, for example, when we invoke Grama Devata, that's the devatas of the Grama, the village. So are we invoking the devatas of the village where our ancestors lived back in India? Are we, when I chant that mantra, or am I honoring the devatas of this land around me here in California? And some of its interpretation, but from the puja perspective, the land must be honored. When we're doing Bhumi Puja, it's to this earth right here underneath our own feet here. And my experience in Mexico and some here in this country with the indigenous people, and I've had the blessing to participate, to be invited into some of their rituals and to talk with some of the holders of tradition, some of the holy women and men of these traditions. There's so many similarities with our Dharma and Vedic pujas. Incredible.
Give some examples of those similarities.
Well, honoring the land, the earth, the elements, the fire ceremonies. When I did a ceremony ritual in some years ago, we wanted to, and my gurus always said this, and this is not a modern concept, the idea that many paths lead to the one. So essentially, Hinduism is not tolerant. That's what an interfaith dialogue, they're striving to become tolerant. We're not tolerant. We're way deeper level of a universal understanding of the oneness and the different manifestations of the one. They have that too. Some of the indigenous holy people that I've spoken with, I remember one of them, she was this incredible grandmother, like a Mataji, but Mexican or Aztec. And she was invoking in her native language, Nahuatl, all of the devas and devis of her Aztec tradition. But she knew that others were there, so she started to say other names. And she said, and the other gods and goddesses of the other traditions of our brothers and sisters, and Shiva and Kali. And as she kept speaking, I thought in my mind, she's never read Swami Vivekananda at Parliament of Religion. She's never read but she's speaking exactly like them. So they have those universality concepts in their theology. It's just embedded, and the connection with the elements. So it's very elemental, very earth, the pujas. And in those pujas, in our pujas, we will always honor the directions, not 4, but we have the 10. They also honoring the directions. The invocation of fire, seeing fire as a priest, Agni Mile Purohitam. Agni is the Purohit. The fire is the Purohit. They have that. They have different devas and devis, but they also have the understanding of what their function is. So just like we can look at Agni Dev and say, well, no, we are not all worshipping Agni Dev as the one supreme, deity or something, but we worship Agni Dev. He's a god, or it is a god. So there's an understanding of where devas and devis, different functions of earth and elements, space. A lot of puja has to do with space. What do you do with the space? How do you purify a space, protect a space, mark a space? This is sacred. And we just have it. Any Hindu household knows where the sacred space is, and you behave differently in that space. You bow to it, you pranam. Definitely won't wear your shoes there. Even if you have house slippers on, you'll still take those off. So what is that little space? It's a sacred space. There's just innate understanding of all of these things. And the indigenous peoples have that in this country too, and in all of the Americas. And it's been really fascinating. So many other things. One other thing I'll say, so it doesn't go on too long. We were talking about the goddesses and the different forms. And I was asking them, I was very interested in their view of Devi, because many of you may know of Guadalupe. Have you seen that very Mexican form of the Virgin Mother Mary? Her name is Guadalupe. She is uniquely Mexican because she appeared to one of the indigenous people, the Nahuatl people, in a miraculous way. And at first, the Catholic Church didn't accept, and they had this long process to finally accept, saying, yes, she is the Virgin Mother Mary. But many in the communities, the indigenous communities in Mexico, view her as their own goddess, Tonantzin, Titlale, or Coatlicue, and that Tonantzin revealed herself to her people, this indigenous, and said, this will be my form now at this present time. This is my new rupa, considering the colonizations, the things that are happening. I'm still with you. I'll take this form. So they relate to her as their own goddess, not as the Virgin Mother of Jesus.
Mm-hmm. It seems almost like
so,
was taken advantage to allow for this practice to continue.
Yes. And then they explained to me how the goddess comes in different forms. And they said, oh, one of them, she's Citlale. She's connected to the star, the morning star. I said, is that the planet Venus? Yes, Venus. And she brings in the light and maternity and blesses the home with prosperity and motherhood. I said, oh, this sounds so much like Lakshmi. And Lakshmi is also her planet is Venus. So a lot of those things happen. Some of their goddesses, Coatlicue, she stands on her consort, just like Kali stands on Shiva. So yeah, a lot of similarities.
Wow. I want to go back to such a beautiful description. I think that there's probably an entire book that you could write on this, just sort of conversations and experiences with this. It's beautiful. I want to go back to how you use the term tolerant or intolerant in an interesting way that I just want to kind of,
yes,
a little bit.
Yeah. When I was in school, I remember reading, and these were those things where I think it was a world studies, in middle school, and they have to give a little blurb about religions and things. And it said Hinduism is the most tolerant religion, of all, and this, that. I always grabbed onto those things, like, what do people think about? Because I knew I was Hindu, but what does everyone else think about that? And so that always stood in my mind. And I felt very proud of that because, tolerance was becoming a thing in society that you were supposed to have. And wow, Hinduism was already the most tolerant. But as I became more familiar with and more interacting with interfaith communities, I realized that tolerance takes a lot of effort for certain religions because there's such a clash of theology. And even, to have a religion that requires conversion and that requires the faithful to go out and convert. There's a lot of pressure to convert, but also to find ways of where theology can connect and where your theology can dominate and replace and destroy another theology. So in that context, tolerance requires a lot of effort. And it's like you have to tolerate. And you think even like in a family dynamic, can you tolerate your obnoxious uncle? Okay, yes. Can you love him? No. But I can tolerate. So tolerate sort of become like in my experience, in my use of it, lowest common denominator for some kind of harmony, some kind of peace. But the Vedic view or the Hindu view or like I think of it in Bengali because it's easier to remember when Sri Ramakrishna would say, Jatomat Tatopat, as many opinions that many have. And we kind of know that the Hindu, we understand. And that understanding isn't tolerance. That understanding is a deep theology, a deep knowing that we all are one. And in fact, Ishvara, Bhagwan, Brahman can take different forms. And there's different access points So we just know that all paths lead to one. So I've been in some Indian households where, somebody might give them a picture of a saint, even a saint. I've been in an Indian household where they have a little picture on the side of Saint Francis, and Saint Francis has a tilak, and he's included in the little arati. And what is he? Oh, he's a sannyasi, a paramhamsa. He's a saint. No problem. So the understanding of universality, of a shared essence, even the concept of a Atman, gave me, and this was something I talked about in my high school days and later with a lot of my African American friends, Latino friends. I would get similar questions. What is it about you? Why are you different? Why are you part of our community? I am included. I have always been welcomed, and I have so many friends, real friends, lifelong friends in these different communities. And, this is usually a point of tension. And I didn't come to this in college, from reading a book about, which is happening, especially in recent years. And I'm glad it's happening. I mean, people need to, and I have to think, what is it about me? It came back to, because I'm Hindu. I didn't verbalize it. I couldn't conceptualize it, but I really knew I am the Atman and everyone else is Atman. Mm. We're all souls. But that wasn't an intellectual process. I didn't read it in a book like, well, we're all humans. No, we're all souls. And you find the soul by looking in someone's eyes. So I just looked and I just wanted to meet. So that instantaneously, it broke through those barriers of racism, whatever. And so my friends growing up, they would tell me, well, we know just by look in the eye, or we get the vibe. We know if someone is racist. We obviously know if they're aggressively racist, but even a subtle levels of awkwardness or whatever, judgment, separation, distance, we feel it. You don't have that. And that's what I wondered, why? I thought about it for years, and it hit me. Of course, it's because as a Hindu, we're taught to relate with the world and at the level of the Atman. We're all souls. And that's why the word tolerant just isn't deep enough for me, because I don't think we are trying to just tolerate other people. Aside from, protecting ourselves from invasion or violence or whatever, I just mean in terms of relating with people in other communities, the worldview that India has, even the view of politically that India has. There's this fundamental essence of understanding that is much deeper than tolerance. And I think that's why the message and the philosophy of the gurus and the philosophy is so appealing to, progressive society and to Americans, because it answers a lot of these questions. How do we all get along? India's slogan, national slogan, diversity, unity and diversity. How is unity and diversity accomplished? Not through tolerance. Because tolerance just seems like it's one thing away from a war. I'm like, I'll tolerate you, but
yeah.
if something goes wrong,
and about to burst, right?
Yeah, that's well said. And it requires a lot of effort. And I commend the efforts that people have. Tolerance is a good goal to have, but it's not the end goal. I think tolerance is a step. And then from tolerance, try to move towards, I don't want to use the word love, because sometimes the word love is kind of cheesy.
Well, it's also
but there's something next.
Weaponized, right? Mm-hmm. Like we've seen as you aptly described, tolerance is often mm-hmm. a mechanism or a tool used for the purpose of conversion. And so is love.
Yes.
The idea of love, right?
True.
A good.
Yeah.
One.
Yeah. Right.
You said so many incredible things just now, and I want to pull a couple of threads from what you said. One is what you just described. It goes back to kind of what that professor told you, right? And I've really come to understand. I almost feel like I've come full circle with this because before I was deeply involved with the Hindu community. You know, I didn't grow up around a lot of Hindus, and of course, I feel a part of the community, but my connection to Hinduism as an American was largely around my spiritual community with my guru, which is a very, very diverse, you know, the Art of Living is incredibly diverse community. So it was based on like my Hinduness and how I understand Hinduism in America. It was not based on how we were perceived, but based on how we perceive. Because the former focuses on identity, and the entire purpose of Hinduism is to not be too attached to identity. And so how can we possibly think about being Hindu? You know, and that's really what to the heart, because that's getting us closer and, you know, deeper and deeper. Not that identity isn't important. It is important. We need it to survive, but that's not, you know, that's the starting point, as you said, the end goal. So that just struck me that we kind of have arrived at the thing. And I've come back to it again, I think now, going back to that space, because I don't think the answers lie in identity on the outside at all. I think it's where a lot of, I think being over attached to identity is what leads to suffering. We can pick it up and use it as it's useful and as it serves, not just ourselves, but in sort of dharmic goals. But if we over-identify with it, it makes us miserable. So the same holds, I think, for Hindu identity. And I think I do think that the path forward for American Hinduism is to put some more attention again on, well, what does it mean to look at the world, to look at the country, at society as a Hindu, not through identity perspective. And everything that you described so beautifully is a beautiful voice in the American project. Really, truly, it's such a beautiful way to contribute to the American project for generations to come. Now, something else you said that's really important, which is this idea of, I mean, you could talk about it as pluralism, but it's kind of like Hindus are, I find my experience of being a Hindu, of growing up in a Hindu home, is that in general, we're just kind of jazzed about everyone's spiritual journey, regardless of what it is. We're thrilled for people, and we can't wait to hear about it and support them and encourage them without feeling any need to pull them onto our own path. Right?
Yes.
We love talking about that stuff. It's like one of our favorite things to hear about people on their paths. Right? Yeah. Now, as a result of Hinduism being described as having so many pathways, there is a line of discourse that's emerged, even from Hindu scholars and from other observers, I think especially in the West, that, well, that's just proof that Hinduism isn't actually a thing, that Hinduism doesn't exist, and that it's just all of these different paths. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, that's a wonderful insight. I wanted to speak to the excitement that many of us feel about other people's religions and paths. And we have that foundation and that knowledge and that philosophy. We have the example of like the Swami Vivekananda, who goes to the Parliament of World Religion, which was a setup. I mean, the Parliament of World Religion was designed to have international dialogue that would prove the superiority of Christianity. And Swami Vivekananda embraced everybody and found the connecting points, celebrated all different religions, and became the star of the whole thing. And so I think his example is a shining light for, I think, a lot of us in America and in other parts of the world, that we know that our philosophy, our people can be celebrated, that there's a place here. I mean, he showed that, and other gurus who come, they show that. So I think we do that. I do want to say, though, that I have observed in myself and some of my other Hindu friends that there's an insecurity that we have, that to hide that, we will talk about other religions because we don't want to talk about our own. It's a kind of a subtle thing, but it's like, I'm Hindu, therefore I'll be really excited about your religion. I can see the divinity and the beauty of your path, but I still don't want to talk about the puja that's happening at my house.
You think it's
it's
security, but for me, I hold my faith. Faith is not the right word, but I hold my dharma. It's so sacred to me that if someone is not ready to
yes, absolutely,
sense of sacredness, then they're not ready to hear about it. And so it's not an insecurity; it's more of a friendship.
That too. I think it's both. It just depends where our heart is. Yes, if it's I always say that even that word gupta of hidden or secret, it's because it's sacred. Sacred things are supposed to be hidden, not out of fear, but because they're sacred. So yeah, I agree that it's a balance. And I think just watching ourselves to know if I'm not speaking about something because it's very sacred to me and intimate, or am I not speaking about it because I'm uncomfortable, it's awkward, I don't know how to speak about it right now, if it's a spiritual conversation. But yes, in general, Hindus have it much easier when it comes to talking about other religions and other cultures because of just the foundation, of our teaching and what that means moving forward. So I wanted to answer that, but now I'm forgetting what was the second part of your...
Is Hinduism really a thing if there are so many...
Yeah. I've been hearing that too. It's definitely a trend. I myself am not an academic and I'm not a scholar, but I do have a feeling and I've seen a little indication that some of this could be originating in academia because it sounds hyper intellectual to me to reach a conclusion that Hinduism is not a thing anymore because of its blah, blah, blah. I totally disagree with that. Just because a certain intellect or a certain paradigm, and if we want to use a vague term, Western, which is pretty vague, but whatever we want to call it, there are certain limiting intellects and paradigms that cannot contain Hinduism, Sanatana Dharma. And so if it can't contain it, it just says it doesn't exist. But it does exist. So it's almost like if I were to have a snarky response, I would say just because you can't fit this in your garage, you're just going to write it off as non-existent. I think what needs to happen is more of an expansion of definitions. I love the term Hindu. I struggled with it at first. I always loved Sanatana Dharma because, and we know that's what we are, but it's just easier a lot of times in conversation to use the term Hindu. And you've written beautiful things about that term. And it is a beautiful term and it does fit. But Sanatana Dharma, the eternal Dharma, eternal, it applies now just as it did thousands and thousands of years ago. It applied for ancestors. It applies now. It will apply for our future generations. That's why Sanatana Dharma is growing. And it is defined. There are terms. One term I love very much. It's just now been born, I would say. At least I'm hearing it more, being developed, but it's coming out of India. And it's a term, metatheism. And I'm really interested in it because, trying to fit Sanatana Dharma in a box of, well, is it polytheistic or is it monotheistic? Is it monotheistic polytheism? Is it polytheistic monism?
Always yes, like to all of them, right?
Exactly. It's yes to all of them. And that's why I think these Indian-born Hindu scholars are starting to try to define things for the modern age and saying metatheism. So I think really, yes, Hinduism is the thing. It is defined. I heard, actually, this was in one of the books I read in high school, Hinduism is the largest disorganized religion in the world. And I think in the context of this book, they weren't trying to be condescending, but they were just trying to define it that it's not organized. So other of the major religions, so not counting I think indigenous religions are major. I think they're holding this world together in many ways. But in modern society,
the Abrahamic religions versus the Abrahamic, maybe.
Yeah, like this, the organized, the big, whatever it is, however many number of they say, okay, it's this, the Dharma religions, and then Islam and Judaism and Christianity. They're organized. They have a certain structure. They have a certain canon. They have a certain number of texts. So then approaching Sanatana Dharma, it's just overwhelming from that paradigm. Well, who's your central authority? Well, it depends. What's the sampradaya? So one of the more recent modern attempts, and it was successful, to define and embrace all of what Sanatana Dharma is, was the opening of the Ram Mandir in Ayodhya. And I signed up to follow the pages, the social media pages and whatnot of the governing board of that opening. So the temple board, basically the trustees and all that. And there were a few posts where they were listing everyone who was invited and who would be represented. And I thought, here it is. This is a moment. And to me, I was so thrilled about it because the list was so long and so comprehensive. It had all of the different sampradaya. No one was left out. It had all of the Vaishnava, all of this, all of the Akharas, the Shaivite, the Shaktas, the Tantras, the indigenous. It had all of them. Then it had listed all of the major, more contemporary ashramas. So it had, ISKCON, Ramakrishna Mission, Art of Living, Shivananda, the big institutions that have been born more recently. It even listed other religions. These people will be representing the Jain population, the Sikh. And Sikh had a lot more representation, but even like Christian and Zoroastrian and all of that. And I didn't see it at all as an attempt to be politically correct. This is coming from a Sanatana Dharma board saying, how do we include everybody? And I wanted to share that joy. I was, of course, sharing it with a number of my Hindu friends, but I didn't know how to share it because there was so much political tension and bad media in this country about it. I just kind of kept it in my heart and shared it with my own community of how wonderful to see that attempt to define and honor all that Sanatana Dharma is. And because of that, and it is defined, and there is ritual, and there is rigidity, and there is structure, and there is hierarchy. And actually we just don't think of it, but we have certain things that all Hindus relate with, and it's not just cultural things. Mm-hmm. And it is a question I've heard a lot. And sometimes I've heard it even in a sarcastic tone, like, well, what makes a Hindu? Mm-hmm. Almost like an argument, like, well, how do anyone can just be Hindu, right? Because you don't convert. Or, well, what do you have to believe in order to be a Hindu? And I said, well, nothing. I mean, we don't believe in belief. So it can start to sound like Hinduism is not a thing, but actually it is. It just hasn't fully been defined in modern terms.
Yeah, it's quite elusive in that way. I've heard the argument made, and you're correct in identifying the source of this as academic and not coming from Shraddha. Well, Hindus didn't call themselves Hindus until invaders came. And I actually want to borrow from the testimony of a 7th grade Hindu American before the California when they wanted to get the term India removed from textbooks because to these South Asian scholars, India didn't exist until the British named it India. And he said, does that mean that dinosaurs didn't exist until paleontologists named them?
Oh, wow. Great. There it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So out of the mouth.
Yeah, out of the mouth. Yeah, a 7-year-old mic drop. That was great. Well, he won that debate.
So I want to go back to another kind of sticky point, I would say, especially from, so the part of Hinduism that exports well is the more intellectual part. There's also, despite the really important, significant history of our gurus who have traveled, beginning with Swami Vivekananda to the United States specifically, there is a lot of skepticism, a lot of demonization, a lot of aversion to gurus. Broadly in the Hindu American community, not everyone, obviously. And I want to just set aside the examples of people who are clearly just charlatans. That, yes, that's going to exist anywhere. And we have ways of identifying a true guru in Hinduism. So that, to me, shouldn't even be a part of the conversation. So we're going to set that aside because Hinduism's dealt with that issue. And the solution is not to divest of gurus entirely. That's not the solution, even though that seems to be the solution of some rational, I'm putting rational in quotes, Hindus. Because gurus are different than purohits. Gurus are different than scholars, right? So talk a little bit about gurus.
Such an important point you bring up. Yeah. And gurus is actually essential to Hinduism, to Sanatana Dharma. We've always had gurus. We always will have gurus. And yes, the term has become confused, demonized outside of the community for sure. And I think it started outside of the community. Yes, the tradition has dealt with charlatans. They have always been and will always be. But actually, there's a still to this day a very robust checks and balances that takes care of it. Eventually, it's sad to me because I think here outside of India, but also it's happening in India. Guru has also become deified too. So I think we all know about the demonization of it. But the deification of guru is also a more recent thing, like 200 years recent. Because there's the Guru Gita was a conversation in the Skanda Purana that Shiv had with Parvati, but he wasn't really talking about every single guru. That when we say like Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Deva, it doesn't mean that every single guru, including our music teachers and our gurus, that they are in fact, Vishnu, Shiva, Brahma. That text had a specific purpose, and it had more to do, I think, with Shiva than it did with gurus. And so the deification of guru and the Vyakti Puja, the worship of a personality, is a turnoff for some people, including other Hindus. Like, I don't want to worship a person. I want to worship Brahman. And so I can understand where that happens. However, you still need a guru. And gurus don't require personality worship. The true gurus don't ever say that. It's up to the devotee if they want to. And in my circle of friends and in some of my mentors, we will talk about the fanaticism of the bhakta. Devotees can become fanatical. They can. It's usually a harmless side effect or consequence of just having a lot of devotion. And what does it result in? I love my guru. My Gurudev is the best. My Guruji is the best. That kind of attitude, like a mom would feel about her own baby. Obviously, it's not, they don't believe that, oh, my guru is the only one or the best. Although some people can get that way. So I think when someone from a distance sees that, they see a lot of personality worship. Maybe they start to see, well, how many pictures of you, guru, do you need in your house? Isn't one enough? Why do you need? And I'm like that too, because I love my guru. I love his pictures. So I want all of the different pictures. But I do think that we have to be careful because in modern society, what has started to happen is because of the philosophy being the thing that exports, because technique, because of this scientific age that we're in, that you need a guru to teach you, give you a technique. some pranayam, a mantra, a kriya, and the guru will also give you a sadhana, and the guru has an institution, an organization to make that easier, more accessible, and all these things. It fits modern life. The deities sometimes, or the Brahman or Ishvara, becomes set aside, and that, I think, triggers within the Hindu community an aversion to gurus. Gurus should be in their place. One thing that I can say in English, I haven't been able to translate it into other languages, but in English, the guru shows the way. The guru does not get in the way. The guru shows the way to God, to Brahman, to Samadhi, but should never be in the way of that.
That's really beautiful. And, it strikes me when I think about, because I describe myself as a disciple, not a devotee of my guru.
Yeah, it's more accurate to say that, I think.
What you're describing.
Like that mood of a disciple, a chela or a shishya, is the mood of Hinduism, of Sanatana Dharma. It's and embodied in all of that is the Hindu approach to discipline and to faith and to seva and all of these beautiful things. But yes, we can be a disciple of a guru and a devotee to our devatas. But sometimes that does get confused, and the discipleship fades away, and then you can get a little bit of that. I think it's just too much personality worship. But I always say that a true guru, knows how to deal with that. So better to worship that personality than worship some other personality.
Right. Well, I would say just maybe a point of reference is if your guru is letting you worship them, that should be a red flag for you.
Yeah, they said that the real guru is always pointing you. They will take some adoration, maybe some respect. They're always pointing you to your sadhana and pointing you to the divine. And I think, there's a guru is not a teacher either. I think, with language, a guru more of a deeper thing. So I do think that it's hard outside of India, because in India there are more gurus, family traditions. But even then, it's like, how do I find a guru? And in the old days, you didn't find your guru on the internet. You found your guru going on pilgrimage, going on yatra. And that old saying that when the seeker's desire is strong enough, the guru appears nearby. I still see that work. I think it's a divine law. It works. You could be in Costa Rica, you could be in Himachal, you could be in Canada. If that desire is strong and pure, the guru appears near, and the guru is there to help and guide and show us the way. And there is a commitment. It's serious. It's a vow. It's not a. I think in the beginning, they say in the beginning you can have many teachers. You're seeking, you're finding, you're looking for what appeals to you. But at a certain point, someone will take that deeper commitment to a guru and have.
You can't be doing all intro courses. You have to pick a major and commit.
Exactly. And I think some traditions in India have an understanding of having different gurus for different purposes. I think that's another thing that sometimes is a turnoff to people in this modern time, is that some of the newer guru lineages that are also attached to an organization, because that's just what you do these days. I mean, that's how you function. That's how you reach more people. A Jagat Guru, I would say. So I think the Jagat Gurus at present, and in the last 50, 60 years, in order to spread that message, they have to have an organization and an institution. Well, that's a turnoff for some people. And also, even though the gurus won't necessarily speak this way, sometimes the institution unknowingly or knowingly puts this message out. You have to choose us, and that's it. Like, we are your only guru now. We are your only path now. And I think that also upsets a lot of Hindus, because it's not that narrow-minded. It shouldn't be. And I hope it doesn't become that in the West, in America. that is like, well, I'm with, and many of the gurus, like now Art of Living, I mean, your Guruji is still present. So you kind of keep an eye on it. But I've noticed that every group has to be careful that we don't fragment our Dharma community by saying, well, I'm with Art of Living. Well, I'm with Shivananda. Oh, and they're ISKCON, and I'm with Vedanta Society.
Yeah.
And we all have different gurus. Like, no. We need to stay together, just like in India, where, yes, you have your own guru, your own sadhana, your own thing, but we're part of the larger Dharma. And I think temples will help with that a lot.
I think temples can help, but I think as long as they're run largely by immigrant Hindus, if they're going to be spaces that don't necessarily feel fully welcoming or resonant for second or third generation Hindus. It's not born of this land, going back to it feels more like an attempt to preserve something from before than a place to discover something for here and for the future here. So the possibility is there, but I think there need to be shifts. And other folks I've spoken to, like board membership, for instance, and we're getting moving away from the heart into the head a little bit here. But, people think of second gen Hindu Americans as teenagers or in their early 20s. We're looking to, as I wrote recently, we were looking at the birth of the fourth generation of Hindu Americans in the next 10 years, right? Second gen are in our 50s and 60s, not just 18 years olds. But if you speak with an American accent, regardless of your ethnicity, there's a question mark over your head.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's, again, I think we need to look at how people perceive the world, not how we are perceived. And that includes what clothes we wear, how we sort of like the aesthetic we perform for authenticity. So I think there's a lot of room to really discover something different for here. And I think the idea of the guru and sort of bringing that back into the imagination of Hindus, I think that's going to be a really important part of this journey for us as a community. I see gurus as the people who hold the spiritual community of Hindus together in society, right? And gurus seeing each other as colleagues, kind of doing the work together, right? So you have all of these different families, but together we form one large family. So that's a really important for us to head into, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
But some of the skeptics, I'll encounter Hindus in the US and around the world who'll say, well, I don't have a guru and I don't know how I feel about that, but I respect that you have a guru and that is a legitimate part of being Hindu, versus Hindus who will look down on me or snicker at me for having a guru. Those are very different ways of pushing it, right? The first more in line with being Hindu, which is, as we said earlier, kind of being jazzed about people's journeys. And the second one just feels the outsider speaking through the Hindu body.
I know. It's so hard. It's really hard. Like when it's in the community, and I don't, some of my friends and we talk about it, it's just, we don't really know what to say about it because it's hard. We just say, well, I guess is it still just after effects of colonization? Is this a generational civilizational trauma that's still playing out? It's just sad to see.
Yeah. Anyway, I guess that's to discover. Gone completely off script in terms of the questions. It's one question or one topic that we kind of discussed earlier. I think is really important. When we spoke, you reflected on what it means to be a Hindu man, and I'm going to add an American Hindu or yogic man.
Yes.
What are some qualities or values that are central to being an American Hindu or a Hindu American? A Hindu.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's been a big question for me of discovery, and I connect this way with a lot of other men in my generation and younger, of just the question in general. What is it to be a man, especially in a society that's very different than maybe what you are used to? So some of my even my second gen Hindu friends, they are used to, you know, if they go back to India or within their own family, they have male role models that coming from a very different culture. So that was part of the question, but also just for myself, I'm drawn to these gurus, to these things. Where do I fit in all this when you have this tremendous peer pressure in this particular society in America of, you know, being a certain type of man, you know, so, and you've got all the different elements there. We all know what they are. So they're there. How does that fit then? How does that intersect with, you know, men wearing skirts to joke right about a dhoti? So who are our heroes? I think that was one of the big things that, and I had read that when I was younger, that we need heroes. Mm. We look for heroes. Mm. It's just something we do. And I really resonated with that. And heroes were provided by our traditions, you know, in ancient times. Now everything's all mixed up and here we are in this, in America where, I mean, in one sense, American society has created new heroes because there weren't any for this new civilization. It's Marvel and, you know, all these other things. So my heroes, I mean, it's just Arjuna or the Pandavas or my hero reading. I was so excited about it. And I could see this blend of, being the warrior, which is really what a man should be, right? But also, in order for them to train to be warriors, they had to learn dance and music and art, and they had their gurus and all of these things. And even from the most superficial levels, that they not only were they very strong and fit, they also had earrings. Mm-hmm. They had, you know, longer hair. They had little arm bracelets. They were cool. I needed them to be cool. So I was looking for pictures or stories that not only excited me, but that seemed cool. Mm. And so if I saw some of the old poster art where they just looked like, and I'm like, why does Shiva have lipstick on? I don't like this picture. And then I would find another picture and say, wow, look at Shiva. I mean, he's strong, but he's beautiful and he's ascetic and he's powerful and he's divine and he loves Parvati. Look how he treats her. And yet he takes in the abandoned outcasts. You know, he can go to the smashan, but he can go just so many different things. So I created in my own mind a fantasy world, so to say, of heroes that really shaped me. And in reading the words of Vivekananda ji and Paramahansa Yogananda about these qualities, I realized. And then, of course, Star Wars comes out. That helped because then I could say to people, well, you know, like the Jedi, you know, but it was hard to express this outwardly to people, but at least in my own self, I began to develop this. But I got plenty of teasing, you know, throughout school for being too sensitive or all these types of things. And I think nowadays, we're faced with another challenge that I see. And I see it a lot in India with films and even some of the art, the deity art. The gods are getting even more muscles. And I think it's an influence a little bit of the superhero culture. It's like, I don't think that just because Bhim was the strongest Pandava doesn't mean that he has to have that many muscles that I can't see his face now or that he had some kind of, you know. So I think muscles is not what gives the strength. Although obviously being fit and being strong, it's a wonderful thing. And, you know, after what India went through, I think it's appropriate and it is time for Indian men to feel strong and muscular and, you know, that warrior, that Kshatriya vibe. However, the strength of a yogi, the strength of the Hindu is also the strength to love, the strength to cry, the affection. And I learned that in the ashram when the sadhus from India would come and visit. we just instantly gravitated to each other. They really saw me, and they would come over to me and say, "Oh, come walk with me." And they'd grab my hand and hold my hand. And I wasn't used to that. And just the affection, and the comfort with feeling, that for a Hindu man to be able to cry, watching the soapy movie or whatever, and expressing feelings, expressing devotion. When I see Indian men, Hindu men coming to our temples in Mexico or here, when I see them cry, when they see Hanumanji or when they see the deities, it makes me cry, because we have to have those types of feelings. And also to follow Dharma. And what does it mean to follow Dharma? So I think it's important to, as a being in the here and now in this day and age, as a man, to find our heroes in our tradition, and to try to, like you said, rather than identifying, oh, I'm Hindu, or just to live it, And I always say that actually we are not defined by what we believe. We are defined by what we do in terms of sadhana or some rituals, and we're defined in the dharmas that we do, and the yagyas, the sacrifices that we make. That defines us. And so ahimsa has come up as a really challenging point with all of this, because how does a strong, warrior, a kshatriya, or how do you defend yourself or your religion or your country and have ahimsa at the same time? Is ahimsa weakness? Is bhakti a sign of weakness? All of these things I have worked with on myself over a lot of time. I mean, I was teased. I won't say bullied, because that is a pretty severe thing. And I was bullied at other times, but in the ashram, I would be even teased by other kind of Westerners for being a certain way. So I think anywhere you go, men have this insecurity about coming across being weak or sensitive or emotional, all these things, when none of that has anything to do with ahimsa, because ahimsa requires tremendous strength and skill and knowledge. And the greatest warriors, even the grandfather Bhishma of all of gave a whole, there's a whole stotra, a whole verses about ahimsa. And I think ahimsa now at present time is going to show civilizations and societies how to survive. And we've already seen two successful ahimsa driven, social political movements, huge one, with Indian independence and with civil rights in America by Martin Luther King. We still need to do it. We still have to live ahimsa. And I think ahimsa is manly. And I think ahimsa is womanly. And I think ahimsa is something that all Hindus live by. Ahimsa, in one of the slokas, ahimsa parama pushpam. There's all these flowers being offered in a manasa puja, all these flowers being offered of different qualities. And it says of the 15 flowers, ahimsa is the parama pushpa. The supreme of all of those flowers is ahimsa, to not harm. So I just think it's important that we keep talking about it while we're trying to find our place in America, which is, and other countries too. And I was even listening to some of the other wonderful interviews with your friend. Is his name Hemant? That was a really wonderful interview, and just hearing his experience and relating so much to it as being a man, growing up, and just the toughness of it, the toughness that you're faced with, like in school and in the workplaces. It saddens me. It really does. And I understand it. I don't judge it at all. And I've talked about it openly with the community, that the women can wear saris, but the men, they still are going to come with their work clothes. Yeah, exactly. Why is that? It's not a criticism. Part of it is because of that survival instinct almost of a lot of men, of like, well, I have to show up a certain way in the work world, in the this. I've got to instead of just if you put on your churidar and kurta, or if you put on a dhoti, a nice thing, does that make you weak or vulnerable or less of a, do you put down your toughness?
If Hindu men knew how often Hindu women circulate Instagram videos of men wearing dhotis, they would start wearing them more often.
There you go. That should be an incentive, right? And I mean, those other questions of Hindu Americans, American Hindus, when do we put on our where do we wear our tilak? When do we rub off our tilak? That's a great starting question. So when do you rub off your tilak after temple? Do you keep it on all day? And should that be anything that we should feel bad about? But some really feel like, gosh, I don't want to go out with that. I don't want to invite, drishti or teasing or bad remarks or harassment. And so, this idea of dressing in a religious way, I also say, well, it's beautiful. Now, I have a dual role because of my religious vocation to wear my dhoti, to wear appropriate when I'm doing pujas and things. But if I'm going to go out to town or go to the market, I'll put on pants and a t-shirt and sandals and just go out. And sometimes someone will see me and they'll say, Narenji, we don't usually see you like that. Mm-hmm. And I see that it's actually good for them to see me like that.
Yeah.
Because I wear it, the robes that I wear it on my heart. I don't need to be showy about it and try to, make a statement. Yeah. So we should blend in, but there are times when we come together, and I see it a lot of times, like for celebrations, and it's always wonderful. And just this weekend, I went to it was like an arangatam for dance, and to see everyone, even the younger people, young adults dressing nicely and all that, and that's wonderful. But I think it's also good. I try to encourage, like, let's bring back the dhoti a little bit. When you're relaxing at home, mm-hmm. in your safe place, or if you're going to do a puja or something, it's easy to just put on shorts or sweats or something and a shirt, but let's remember that when we dress a certain way, it also affects our mind.
Yeah. It's interesting. I grew up with my dad. As soon as he got home from work, he would just cast off all of his clothes. And the first thing he needed to do was put on a dhoti. And even if it was like the middle of winter in New York and he would be freezing, why don't you just put on dharmas? And no, this is what I'm whole shelf dedicated just to his veshtis, to his dhotis. I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours, and I feel compelled to tell you, you need to write a memoir. Okay. Would really relish reading it, and it would serve greatly if you were to write a memoir. So we will talk offline about that. But I wanted to leave off on a couple of things. One is, you have mentioned that you work a lot with youth, and that's of interest to you, and youth in the diaspora. What is a message you have for them? And think this generation, couple of generations down, what is something you would?
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I say when I look, and I'm closing my eyes now to just visualize them. So when I look out and I see a group, it warms my heart. I feel so proud to see them. And I say, you're American, like me. And you're born here, you're American. And you're Hindu. And so am I. And you have, through your parents and through your tradition, you have a connection to your roots. And I always talk about that. Your roots give you strength. Wherever a tree is planted, the roots are everything. And when the roots are healthy and strong, the tree can grow, it can spread out to give shade to others, to give fruits, so we can be as embracing, of this country, America, where we're born, to love this country, to make it a beautiful country. You enrich it. You enrich this country with the culture. Enjoy it. Be proud of your roots. Be proud of that culture. And many of our American friends, because you have friends, I have friends, we go to school, they're interested, they're fascinated by so much. They're of our music, our culture, our dance, our food, all of that. But also in your heart and your home is also where you will find your roots. In your heart is no one needs to know what we pray. In your heart, that is the altar. That is the shrine. And in your heart, you can have any one of your beloved devas will be there for you at any time. Mm. Shiva, Ma, Durga, Krishna, Ram, Hanumanji, but also your home. So just that's the access to our roots, to your roots. Keep connected. Go back to India if you can, but also embrace America, because this is where we are now. And America needs you. Mm. I need you. Mm. And there is a sense of community that's not insular. No, we have our people, so to say, but as Americans, everyone is our people. And our gurus and even our scriptures will say, no one is a stranger. We are all one. We are all the same. So you can live that. You can bring that in. And if you're uncomfortable with your traditions, if you're embarrassed by the pujas happening in your house, if you don't understand, if you're teased, if you're bullied, if you don't know how to talk about what it is, you can call me. I'm here for you, and many are here for you. We want to help you because it's you are like pioneers. If this is you're the first generation of Americans, or maybe you're the second or third or fourth. It's still something new. You're going to be doing something that your ancestors didn't do. And so it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of strength, creativity, but you're not alone. And I've figured out how to do this for however many years. So, I want to be your friend. We can talk about American stuff and whatever's going on here, which is great because I love this country. I see its potential. I see its faults. I see it. But I also hold on to my roots, and I want to be able to share that with you and our community. So we can come together and I want to be able to, I need places too where I want to be able to come over and with my dhoti on or not. And I want to, and we can laugh and talk about things, but that gives an enrichment, doesn't make us separate. It enriches our existence. And your roots and these spiritual, it may not seem like it, especially if you're growing up and you're in high school and you're being bullied, or you're in college or taking a course or something, and you hear things about Hinduism. I know many, many great thinkers throughout history, even in this country, the transcendentalists, the Emersons, whatnot. They look up to the philosophies of India. They have for centuries. They've been fascinated to the point of appropriation or conquest or whatever, but many look up to it. So this is a chance for you, for us, to bring that, to contribute to this society and to this world, from your very bones, from your own roots, from your own culture, to make something incredible in your field, in your career, in your workspace, in your family, in your social space. Bring something in the way you live it that comes from Sanatana Dharma, that comes from your heart as a Hindu, that comes from your sadhana, that may come from a yatra that you took. Those are some of the things that I wish to say.
Lovely. Just really beautiful. Really beautiful. And that leads me actually beautifully to my next question, which is tell us about some of the projects that you're working on. I know that you're an incredible musician. I have some of your music that I listen to, but where can people find you and what you do?
Well, I was in the ashram for so long. When I came out, I didn't really know how to put myself out there. Kind of shy about that in a lot of ways. So people were very frustrated with me because there was no way of. I would just be like, I don't know, send me an email. And because I love to chant, and it's part of our thing, our temples and our life, our religion. We love to sing, right? Kirtan and bhajan. I never thought I would be recording albums, but some of the mandirs and other people forced me to do it. Like, we'll pay for it. Please record yourself singing. And I knew some musicians. So there are some albums that are out there I put out. And I recently formed the name Avahana came to me because, well, whatever, you have to have something. So it's Avahana means invocation, and it's that part of the puja where we invoke that Avahanam. And I feel like wherever I go, that's really what I'm being called for, is to invoke that. So there's a website there. I don't really have a strong presence, social media and things like that. But if you look up either my name, I always say there's only one Naren, from Naren Schreiner in the universe. So usually with those two names, I show up. The music, Sangita Yoga, I had on some online resources. That name came to me. My guru's talking about it, but also I realized it's the yoga of music, that sacred part of music. So some years ago, because so many people wanted to learn Hanuman Chalisa, I decided with my dear friend Lopamudra Bose, we created a free online course to teach Hanuman Chalisa. And so that's Sangita Yoga. That's there, and Avahana. And I guess just finding me somehow on Facebook or Instagram, whatever, send me a message. Someday it might be easier to get in touch with me, but that's how you can find me now.
Wonderful. Well, my dear, it has been such an honor to just have a glimpse of your beautiful Hindu heart. This conversation.
Thank you.
Delight to get to know more about you. And I'm quite sure that everything that you shared will uplift or enlighten something in all of the lives of the people who listen to this. So thank you so much for this.
Well, thank you, Indu. And I first met you over Facebook, reading your writings. I think you have such an important voice, an important role in Hinduism in America. And I thank you for being here and for inviting me in. And I look forward to more and to getting to know your community more and to expanding what we all have.
Well, that's it for this episode of That's So Hindu. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it now with someone who you think will like it too. Please also like, follow, and or subscribe to this show on whatever platform you're listening to it on. You can help ensure that more of these get made by making a donation to HAF at www.hinduamerican.org/donate. Thanks again for listening.